Oh mega lol. So let's talk about things that I find problematic in Railjack. That's right, it's my turn to make a video like this. Instead of doing a 45-minute hullabaloo, we're going to split this into several key topics, specifically to do with gameplay and less to do with the whole RNG and reactor memes and all of that stuff. That stuff I've either already talked about rather briefly or in depth already, or it's already things that people have talked to death anyway, so I kind of don't feel like I need to throw in my 2 cents into what is essentially a sea of opinions, so we're just going to leave all of that very much alone. But in terms of the gameplay, I want to talk about tactical avionics with this video, and then maybe for the next video we'll talk about battle avionics, and then at some point I'll probably talk about something like weapon rebalancing and various other bits and bobs that I find annoying about Railjack. And the reason why I want to talk about tactical avionics before battle avionics is because, at least with tactical avionics, they're mostly alright. They're all at least somewhat useful in some way, shape or form, whereas with the battle avionics there are quite a few that I find to be completely unusable, and then there are some that are just simply not strong, and then there are some that are just really, really good. But at least with tactical avionics, they're all balanced around being usable to some level. First off, I think all tactical avionics should have a duration cooldown attached to their icon as soon as they are being used. For example, you have Void Cloak, it lasts for about half a minute, so as soon as you use it, there should be a great big 30, 29, 28, etc. that shows up on the icon of Void Cloak. Right now, the only cooldown timer that exists is the cooldown to the next use of Void Cloak, which I guess you can infer how much duration of Void Cloak you have left, but do you really want to be doing that kind of mental math in the heat of battle? I don't think so. So having a very big second duration countdown timer should be really, really useful for tactical avionics. And this should apply to basically all the tactical avionics, except for a couple that I don't actually care about duration at all. So with the tactical avionics, we're going to be going by alphabetical order, except for like maybe one. We'll start off with BattleForge. Now, to me, BattleForge has a big problem in the sense that there's not really that moment where you want to use it that's perfect. So what do I mean? The perfect use of BattleForge is when you have 4 things that you want to build in your forges right now. You then have an additional 4 things that you want to build immediately after those forges have done processing, and you happen to have all of the resources for 8 things immediately. Oftentimes in the later half of a mission, you probably have enough resources to build a lot of things. But if your resource management skills are even remotely sensible, you typically don't need to build 8 things at once. The background footage that you're seeing for this is literally like the most contrived, horrendous resource management skills I could potentially ever perform in Railjack. I have never had this scenario just by normal gameplay. So I think the best way to improve BattleForge is to make BattleForge a status that is applied to every single forge as soon as you use it. When you use the forge, that takes up that BattleForge charge, and then you get to use that specific forge immediately again. In much the same way that if you happen to be at the dock, you can just hold click to just rapidly build stuff. If you use BattleForge, I think that should allow you to just rapidly build 2 things at once with the single forge without having to use it and then jump out and then use it again. At least then you're not wasting an 8-minute cooldown on maybe 5 things, as opposed to the 8 things that you should be building to make full use of that 8-minute cooldown. The next one is going to be Breach Quanta. Now, there's nothing really bad about Breach Quanta. It really just serves as a safety net, and that's fine. It can have that super duper niche scenario that otherwise would mean that you probably never really have to activate it. You certainly don't really have to activate it if you happen to be in a team. If you're playing solo, then yeah, okay, sure, having Breach Quanta could be useful, but otherwise it's not necessary. However, right now, I guess the only minor problem would be that you could accidentally activate it, and that just blows an entire cooldown for the next however many minutes, and you never know if you're going to have to use it to stall a breach because reasons. So I think first off, Breach Quanta should be straight up unusable if there happens to not be a major breach. And the second thing that I would prefer that Breach Quanta can do as well is it should be able to patch minor breaches. So the little ones that aren't really going to blow up your ship within a minute, but the ones that will lower the amount of hull that you have, the amount of health that your ship has, essentially making Breach Quanta also kind of work in a similar way to fire suppression, but with breaches as opposed to with fires and electrical fires. The next one's going to be Death Blossom and by extension Battle Stations, because honestly, I don't think both of them should be separate. I think they should just merge into their own tactical avionic. And by merging them together, obviously we now have a 10 drain tactical avionic that is super duper powerful. So for balance sake, I would agree that this should be the only 13 drain tactical avionic, because at that point, it kind of functions like a battle avionic as well. Except it's going to be on a 300 or 240 second cooldown, or somewhere in the middle, 270 second cooldown. I don't know. By being the 13 drain tactical avionic, it would be the only tactical avionic that is worth 13 drain, as opposed to the only tactical avionic that is currently 13 drain, which is Flow Burn. Now, the thing about Flow Burn that puzzles me is the super duper high drain. It is currently a 13 drain tactical avionic. Why? It's just giving you speed. I agree, speed is really, really good, and I build my ship for speed above everything else, but I don't really think speed is worth 13 drain on a tactical avionic. So I think Flow Burn should decrease to a 10 drain. I don't think it's an 8 drain like Fire Suppression. I think it should just be a 10 drain. Alternatively, if you really want Flow Burn to be a 13 drain tactical avionic, then we need to make it worth that 13 drain. And the way to make it worth 13 drain is to also add infinite boost. What that means is when you activate Flow Burn and you're boosting at an additional 30%, your boost meter doesn't go up. In much the same way that when you're using Death Blossom, if you happen to be mid-magazine, your magazine heat buildup just stops. And you can just keep firing. With Flow Burn, you essentially get free boost for 10 seconds, and you get 30% additional boost speed for 10 seconds. Then we have a tactical avionic that is worth 13 drain. The next one is going to be Fire Suppression, and honestly there's nothing wrong with Fire Suppression. It's pretty solid, especially as an 8 drain tactical avionic. I think maybe something that would be preferable is to have a bit of a cooldown management kind of thing, where if you're only going to use Fire Suppression to extinguish up to 4 fires or whatever, half of the maximum fires your current Fire Suppression is at its level, at its node, then the cooldown should be reduced to half. Or alternatively, just make it a fully proportionate thing. So for example, if I use Fire Suppression on 4 fires, still reduces the cooldown by 4/8 or 1/2 to 150 seconds. If I were to use it on 6 fires, it would reduce the cooldown to 3/4 or 200 and I believe 25 seconds. Either that or keep it simple and just say if it's less than 4 fires, you get to reduce the cooldown by 1/2. If it's more than 4 fires, then you're shit out of luck. You're going to have to be sitting there with 300 second cooldown. Use your goddamn Revelite. The next one is going to be Form Up, and there's nothing really wrong with Form Up. People don't like it for various reasons, such as nabbing them from doing objectives. That's fine. You don't necessarily have to use it, but at the moment, I think the only thing that's wrong with it is like a bug. For some reason, it seems to trigger itself without even going on cooldown, and it actually causes people to come back to the ship. They then ask, dude, why'd you use Form Up? And then I press L, or in this case, I use my mouse 5 button, and I look at the cooldown and it's just not on cooldown. So I'm like, I didn't use it. So if anything, DE, fix your shit. The next one is going to be Intruder Stasis. And honestly, I think the problem is that it's annoying to use if your ship happens to be bombarded by ram sleds. At the moment, when you use Intruder Stasis, it is just a single instance of Intruder Stasis. Any new intruders that show up via ram sleds, they don't get affected by it. I don't think that's a good idea. I think Intruder Stasis, for the duration that it lasts, should just be like a field of stasis. So in much the same way that Limbo's Cataclysm Stasis meme works, where if enemies walk into the specific area, they also get stasis, Intruder Stasis should basically work like that. The next one is going to be Squad Renew, and my problem with Squad Renew is that it competes with Form Up. It literally does less things than Form Up, but it has a longer cooldown. Form Up brings people back to the ship and it heals them up to 100%. Squad Renew only heals them up to 100%. Why does Squad Renew have a longer cooldown than Form Up? I don't know. And secondly, I barely ever feel the need to use Squad Renew because people are generally sensible enough not to blow themselves up, number one. So, things to do to fix Squad Renew include, number 1, reduce the cooldown. It should not have a longer cooldown than Form Up. Honestly, I don't even think it should have as long a cooldown as Form Up. Maybe make it 150 seconds. I don't know. The second thing is make it be able to revive people who are bleeding out. I really think this should happen. Number 3, and this is just a wild one out there, maybe make it a ship renew instead of a squad renew. So if your ship happens to be low in health, then use squad renew and suddenly your ship is back in tip-top action. This will be really effective for people who actually build for Zeki bulkhead, people who actually build their ship for hull and armor. This will be really, really good for them. Or alternatively, just make it a heal over time instead of a straight like Trinity Blessing type heal. And finally, we have Void Cloak, and honestly, there's nothing wrong with Void Cloak. Leave it the hell alone. So yeah, those are the tactical avionics and some of the things that I think are problematic about them and some of the solutions that I think would make them a lot better. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. As I prepare my list of things for the battle avionics, I invite anyone who happens to have Shadow Burst, Blackout Pulse, and Fiery Phoenix to see if you can actually find any way to make them useful right now. In my opinion, Shadow Burst and Fiery Phoenix seem to be completely unusable in that they straight up don't even work. So just let me know if you could come up with a way to make them work in much the same way that, for example, Seeker Volley is affected by Warhead. Otherwise, until next time, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.